Welcome back to Salam Media, the home of humanitarian journalism, with me, Shabnam Palesa Mohammed, guest presenting today on Mid-Morning Talk and bringing together a superb selection of guests overnight, very quickly, really. And we're talking about Palestine Solidarity, from Africa to international. And it's all about the actions that we're taking, from the arts to human rights to the law to journalism, and that's what it's all about. So if you are joining us from any part of the world, please feel free to share the link to the show so more people can participate in the freedom of Palestine, Africa, and the world. In conversation now with Yeshelen Govender. He's a civil society activist with a legal background and an executive member of the South African Palestine movement. Yeshelen, welcome to the show.
And hello to your listeners as well.
Thank you very much. I think we missed the first part of what you said, but it's good to have you here with us. So you've been participating on an executive board member level or an organization level with the South African Palestine movement. Tell us more about the movement. What is its vision, objectives? What does it do?
All right. The South African Palestine movement, at the moment, we're primarily a Durban-based movement with a presence in Limpopo, is one of the other provinces that we have a presence in. What it is basically is a consolidation of activists, representatives from various Palestinian solidarity groupings, right? And we work in conjunction with a number of other solidarity organizations which operate on a national level. So we're talking about organizations such as the South African BDS Coalition. We'll be talking about the climate justice sector. And we have built relationships with representatives from those different action groups, I would say. And part of the purpose of creating this movement was to consolidate a number of isolated groups into one movement that can then operate a cohesive and coherent strategy, which would deal with the Palestinian issue, or I would say the Palestinian issue at the moment, the Palestinian crisis, to be honest.
Excellent. Thanks, Yesh. What are some of the activities that the organization has been focused on, and what are some of the challenges that are experienced by members of the movement?
All right. I'm going to start with possibly the simplest yet most consistent activity that we've engaged with or engaged in. And that is something which we call the Fridays for Palestine picket. It's a picket protest or picket gathering, where and it primarily takes place in the Durban city, in this Durban city and some of the surrounding suburbs, which is held once a week on a Friday. At the moment, we run it from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And the purpose of that picket is it's almost to have a permanent reminder to people that there is an ongoing genocide taking place, and there is this ongoing liberation struggle that the Palestinian people are currently fighting it at the moment. It's not a massive rally. It's not, there's no speeches or anything of that nature that take place at these pickets. It's a gathering of like-minded activists and humanitarians who get together once a week consistently. It's been running for more than 70 weeks now. And that's a program that we hold once a week, and it's assisted us quite a bit in actually bringing in new members and conscientizing them on the issues that are at stake. Some of the issues that we raise awareness around during these pickets is the boycott issue. We initially started just bringing attention to the fact that there's a genocide taking place. And then we've started to focus these pickets on, we've been running a consistent campaign dealing with the boycott of products that are linked to the Israeli economy, which are based in Israel, which are products of Israel, which are then, exported for sale in other countries, including South Africa. And we look at a lot of the multinationals that are assisting in propping up the Israeli economy and actually the Israeli apartheid government by investing in Israel, by locating their operations in Israel. And that's why you'll see companies such as Coca-Cola is a target, McDonald's is a target, because they are actively assisting in propping up this what is actually an apartheid state. That's the simplest. That's the simplest of our initiatives. That's actually, for your listeners, that's the easiest one for them to participate in, because all it means is just pitching up once a week for a picket. They don't even have to come with their own flags and banners. We have our stuff with us, and we can provide people with things such as posters. That's the simplest one. The other initiatives that the SAPM, I'll say SAPM. The other initiatives that SAPM is undertaking is a focused approach to shops who are stocking products which fall under the boycott target list, and trying to persuade these various shop owners and to remove those products, or at least inform their customers that they don't necessarily have to buy something made by Coca-Cola, and that they have the option, they have alternative options. And that's more of an education, that's educating the shop owners, and also sort of bringing in a certain amount of pressure onto them to remove products from their shelves, or to stop making further purchases of those products. Okay, there's various other initiatives that we undertake. Part of it will involve an element of running educational programs to actually educate people about to provide them with more in-depth information on Palestine and the actual struggle that the Palestinian people are fighting.
Absolutely.
Right.
So yes, if I can just come in there to talk about one of the stores in Durban that has decided to take an ethical stance against stocking apartheid settler colonial regime products is Glenwood Bakery, right here in Durban, a very favorite spot for many Durbanites. The food is healthy, it's organic, it's locally produced, and they do not stock anything from apartheid Israel, right? So talk to us about that accomplishment. And also the owners of the bakery come along to these demonstrations and pickets on Fridays, and of course other events as well. So this is quite an accomplishment and an example to others.
All right. I will say that this sort of attitude and this approach is something that is highly appreciated by the Solidarity movement. Okay, I myself, I'm not going to take credit for the interactions with the Glenwood Bakery. That was done by fellow activists from our movement. Who, the thing is that they had a sympathetic ear already, right, with the Glenwood Bakery, and once you have that sympathetic ear, these activists were able to engage and work out how, and the thing is that the people who operate the Glenwood Bakery were fully on board with the program. And for us, that's a major win, simply because the number of people who know of this establishment, who actually frequent it, and from the bakery side themselves, they've resisted pressure from people who would ordinarily have been regular patrons of that bakery. And to their credit, Glenwood Bakery has taken the ethical stance. They've resisted the pressure. People have told them, we're going to stop frequenting your establishment. We will. There were threats of a reverse boycott against Glenwood Bakery, and to their credit, they resisted those threats, right? And that for itself is a major victory for us. And we do hope that there will be other establishments that follow the example that has been set by the Glenwood Bakery.
So yes, I looked at the video that was posted by SAPM on TikTok, and here's one of the comments. This was a video that we had filmed together with Saidu Nisa, who's also one of the executive members of SAPM at Glenwood Bakery. So the video gets posted on TikTok. Here's one of the comments. I respect this business with all my heart, and I would support them with all my heart. All businesses take a stand like it is your own children in Palestine. So that's powerful, right? That's showing that our initiatives make a difference, that courage is contagious.
Definitely, I would fully agree with that. And I think like one of the principles that must be kept in mind is a principle of people over profit. And I think that the attitude that Glenwood Bakery assumed towards us epitomizes that principle, because the thing is that as a result of the threats against, and I would call it them threats, the threats against Glenwood Bakery would have impacted their actual income, and they resisted those threats. And I think that is the stance that people must take, regardless of the pressure. This is a moral issue. It involves ethics. It's a case of humanity, and at some point you take a stance. You take a stance over whether you want to get profits or whether you actually want to uplift humanity itself.
People over profit, indeed. It's such an important theme of the work that we do in the human rights space, in the anti-war, pro-peace space, in every space, really. And at the center of those profits are corporations, right, who often try to avoid accountability for the destruction caused by their often negligent, reckless, or intentional behavior. And we see that play out in South Africa, in Africa, and around the world. Different corporations, many of whom monopolize resources and assets and use their influence to buy political campaigns and to profit off the suffering and exploitation of people. And one of those most exploitative and controversial industries involves energy, and specifically coal and gas, for example. And this plays out very strongly when one looks at the companies that are operating in South Africa that are producing this coal and exporting it from our soil to the apartheid settler colonial regime called Israel. On the 21st of August, earlier this month, let's bring up that poster. There was a collaborative effort for a protest against this very practice. And we'll look at that poster now, essentially calling for an energy embargo. This was on the 21st of August. And it was around the country where people came together to say, not in my name, no coal for genocide. And they're highlighting and spotlighting specific companies that are involved. And what really got my attention from this poster, which we'll look at shortly, is the number of organizations that are endorsing this call wholeheartedly and putting their efforts into ensuring that this becomes a reality. But it's not easy. These are behemoths that we're looking at with lots of financial capital. But of course, the power of the people is greater than people in power. Talk to us, Yeshelen, first about what these companies are involved in and why it's so important to take a stance against them.
All right. On the energy embargo issue, as the South Africa Palestine movement, I outlined initiatives that we have been running. The energy embargo campaign, and I would link it to another campaign which is operating on an international level, which is, it basically would fall under, in terms of social media talk, it's #BlockTheBoat. Right, and the energy embargo campaign is linked to the Block the Boat campaign. The influence of the private sector here, right, is that, and I'm gonna, specifically in the context of South Africa, right. I've previously outlined this in other pieces, but the issue that we face here is that we are among the largest coal producers in the world. Okay? And we export coal to multiple destinations throughout the world, and it's a travesty that one of the destinations that South African coal arrives at is Israel, right? And as at mid-2025, there could be some changes in the percentages since I last looked at them. But as at mid-May 2025, South African coal exports or Israel's coal imports from South Africa amounted to up to at least 39% of Israel's total coal imports arrive from South Africa, right? Which means that it's approaching half Israel's coal supply is obtained from South Africa. Okay. And when we're going into the issue of like exploitation and so on, and looking at what you referred to as the behemoths of industry and capital. What in South Africa, what we are looking at is a mining company called Glencore, right, which is an Anglo-Swiss mining company. It's a multinational. It's got a presence throughout South America and Africa, including in the Congo region, and the ethical practices, Glencore's business model, the way in which they conduct business, has drawn a tremendous amount of criticism due to what I would refer to as a ruthless model, right, which focuses on maximum extraction of mineral resources, but minimal regard to the impact of the humans affected here. So we are talking about communities situated around mining operations that actually deal with severe, the consequences to those communities is tremendously damaging. They suffer from issues such as the pollution. A lot of the community activists and environmental activists trying to like prevent the damage that mining causes. They are actually, there's been incidents of a lot of these activists end up getting assassinated by unknown parties. And that is the context within which the mining sector in general operates. There's a lot of intimidation surrounding it. And that falls into part of the exploitation of the actual human beings that surround these mining operations. The other issue would be the actual exploitation of mineral resources. And if we are looking at the energy embargo, on an international level, we are trying to do an energy transition away from fossil fuels. Purely because of not purely, but a good part of it is because it's now known that fossil fuels cause immense damage to the environment. And I mean, like we're dealing with a climate that's in crisis, with the degradation of our environment and climate, and a lot of it is due to the consumption of fossil fuels. Right? And that is another motivation for actually the reason why this energy embargo campaign, which the first national protests were held on the 21st of this month, the reason why there was such widespread support for it is because it's a sort of campaign that impacts on different levels. Right? You've got the climate justice sector who are worried about the environmental impacts of mining and the fossil fuels. Okay? Then you have the actual like civil society groupings, right? Civil society and humanitarian groupings that are worried about the conduct of the mining operations and the way in which Glencore in particular conducts itself, and they want to oppose this. And you know, the fact of the matter is, and you know, it might seem as though I'm harping on about Glencore, but the thing is that Glencore's operations have resulted in the birth of an international movement called Resist Glencore, simply because throughout the world, their operations have proven so destructive that community and different communities and organizations have consolidated themselves to conduct an international campaign against this mining company that is like basically is viewed on as wreaking havoc throughout the globe. And you know, I made reference to Congo, right? To operate for a mining company to operate in Congo, right, free of interference and without intimidation, the only way you can do that is if you negotiated a deal with a local warlord. No? And if you're operating in South America and you're looking at a country like Colombia, to operate in certain areas, the only way you can operate there is if you make a deal with the local narco traffickers, so
Right.
that they
And
don't,
certainly, Yeshelen, what's at the center of the mass atrocities in the Congo as well as the famine in Sudan, again, is imperialism. That is an evidenced fact. So, of course, there are common enemies using corporations as a front to destroy people, to destroy their lives, their dignity, their land, their resources, their homes, and their very environment. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Glencore, but also African rainbow minerals, the relevance of the ICJ case, and what can we do? How can we get involved? Let's take a quick ad break. When we come back, we'll be back with Yeshelen Govender from the South African Palestine movement.
Thank you, Shabnam.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school,
And we want education, a better education.
learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Dad, these Frymax chips are so tasty.
Wow, that really takes me back. My dad bought me a Frymax chips every day after school. They were my favorite when I was your age as well. Quality is at the very heart of what we do, and that's why we ensure that every Frymax packet is filled with the beautiful goodness and flavor-packed taste that you've come to expect from us since 1982. Frymax, from generation to generation.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
You South African, of course. You anxious about the future. We've got you covered. Build on your wealth portfolio with Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, Durban, or call us on 031-202-4700 for more information. Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange, your passport to gold investment.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
We're back live on Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster, with me, Shabnam Mohammed, guest presenting this morning with a spotlight on Palestine liberation and solidarity efforts from Africa to around the world. In conversation still with Yeshelen Govender from the SAPM, and we're talking about the energy embargo and coal in particular, following a nationwide protest picket demonstration and rally on the 21st of August outside the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. You'll see the poster there, Pretoria, Durban and Johannesburg, and take a look at the number of organizations that are supporting this call. So Yesh, let's talk about what it feels like as a South African to know that our country has taken the case of Palestine to the International Court of Justice and at the same time coal from our soil is fueling the genocide in Palestine. What does that feel like to you as an activist? And what is a common sentiment amongst other activists and civil society on that topic?
Okay, to start on the first aspect, the ICJ case. As a South African, it brought to me a sense of immense pride that our country took the step and actually charged Israel for genocide. A lot of us in the Palestinian Solidarity movement are in contact with Palestinians, whether it's on the West Bank or in Gaza. And the fact of the matter is, our country taking that step of charging Israel with genocide and the manner in which our country laid out that case. So we didn't start our argument from October 7th. Our argument started from basically the argument starts from 1948 using a direct date in terms of if we're talking about the genocide. But there's an argument that the genocide actually started before 1948. And it was a source of immense pride for me that when our country laid these charges, they took our representatives there, which I have to say, for me, epitomized the idea of South African excellence. The legal team that operated on this case, they laid out the entire history of this conflict and and why Israel should be charged for genocide, and that gave me a sense of immense pride. However, on the issue of South African coal being funneled into the Israeli energy grid, for me, the word that actually springs to mind on this, to describe this, is travesty. That is a travesty. It's a travesty of morality, to be honest. For me, it's inexplicable that a country that suffered under an apartheid regime and which eventually managed to overcome an apartheid regime now plays a role in providing or in meeting the energy needs and is exporting our mineral resources to a country that is currently and brutally implementing another apartheid system. And I'm not even talking about the genocide, I'm just dealing with the issue of apartheid, right? And why it is unacceptable for the victims of apartheid to be supplying current perpetrators of apartheid with we're talking about mineral resources, but to be honest, I feel nothing from South Africa should be going to Israel. Nothing. We should have no role in the Israeli economy.
Absolutely, but it is important to talk about this existing relationship as we trace it from 1940s through apartheid, where apartheid Israel refused to sever its relationship with apartheid South Africa and was, of course, accused of supplying nuclear and other weapons to the apartheid state of South Africa to decimate people of color. And that relationship has just continued. So on one hand, we have the justice initiatives, which were extremely laudable, and we're glad that South Africa took that position. But at the same time, the other side of exactly that same coin is continued economic and diplomatic relations. We certainly have not taken the necessary steps from an economic and a diplomatic standpoint. Why do you think that is? And does the fact that African Rainbow Minerals being owned by Patrice Motsepe, the brother-in-law of President Cyril Ramaphosa, have anything to do with the fact that coal is still going to apartheid Israel?
Well, that's the elephant in the room, isn't it? Right? Look, to place things in context here, right? Basically, Glencore, it acquired a South African mining company by the name of Xstrata, right? One of Xstrata's partners is African Rainbow Minerals, which is run by Patrice Motsepe. Okay? And Mr. Motsepe received a $135 million loan to set up African Rainbow Minerals. And it actually was, and I'm going to quote one of our South African activists and academics by the name of Patrick Bond. And he says that basically, he describes this as the deal which catapulted or vaulted Motsepe to becoming South Africa's richest black businessman. Right, and I would also like to let your listeners know, we took the protest actions that commenced or which took place on 21st August are not the first efforts to deal with the energy embargo and the coal issue in particular. There have been engagements, numerous engagements with government itself. We've tried writing letters to them. Right? We've tried direct engagements through meetings with them. We haven't received the sort of like positive feedback that we would think would come naturally in these circumstances. And that is the whole reason why people decided that if we're not getting responses to that form of engagements, we have to actually go to the streets and actually stage a protest in person outside these DTIC offices, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, to say that people actually feel deeply enough about this issue to turn up physically outside your offices and say, take the necessary measures to impose an embargo on coal to Israel. Okay. The engagements with DTIC, and if you just bear with me, I just want to go to the response that we received from the Minister, Parks Tau. Just please just bear with me. I want to get his direct quote on this. Ah, man.
Well, while Yeshelen is looking for that quote from Parks Tau, it is important for us to hear the response from DTIC on an official level, because we have to talk about what steps will come next. Perhaps the Palestine movement in South Africa, all of it, the entire movement needs to now consider legal action to interdict Glencore, African Rainbow Minerals, and other operators who are supplying, facilitating, marketing, anyone involved in that supply chain of coal to apartheid Israel. Perhaps that is the next step, Yeshelen. Would you agree, given that we've had little to no impact thus far on the supply of this coal energy for genocide?
Look, I think on a public relations level, I would say that there has been progress because there's now greater awareness that this is actually happening. A lot of South Africans were unaware that our coal was going to Israel. Right? And I think just getting that knowledge out there is a big move, and it will assist in the shift of attitude among South African citizens towards these operations. On the legal side of things, the fact of the matter is, we launched the case at the ICJ using the provisions of the Genocide Convention, right? I'm not going to go through the Genocide Convention chapter and verse, but just to synthesize certain critical elements from that. What the Genocide Convention requires is states to basically stop, right? You stop any actions, you stop the provision of materials which could possibly allow a genocidal campaign to continue, right? And our country is the country that brought the case using those provisions, Now, this coal that we are moving to Israel, it enters the Israeli energy grid. That is the same energy grid that powers Israeli factories which manufacture drones, they manufacture missiles, they manufacture the bullets and tanks which are currently being used in a genocide. That's a direct link to Israel's conduct of the genocidal campaign. Okay. The next issue to look at is our country is one of the founding members of the Hague Group. Okay, and the Hague Group, that's a coalition, an alliance of states, primarily from the global south, okay, who have looked at the way in which the UN and the UN Security Council in particular has dealt with Israel's genocide campaign against the Palestinians, and I would include within the West Bank and Gaza. It's not, you can't divide the two areas, right? Because Israel is doing the same thing in both. It's just that in Gaza it's a bit more, it's a lot more brutal. And our country is a founding member of the Hague Group, which made, there's commitments that were made under the Hague Group by the Hague Group, right? In particular, it's there was I think it's in July 2025. The Hague Group had a meeting in Bogota, Colombia. Colombia is another one of the founding members of the Hague Group, right? And in those commitments, there were a number of commitments made by the members of the Hague Group. Right? And I'm going to quote to you a statement signed off by President Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa, Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and Gustavo Petro, the President of Israel. And this quote is, "The choice is stark. Either we act together to enforce international law, or we risk its collapse. We choose to act not only for the people of Gaza, but for the future of a world where justice prevails over impunity. Let this moment mark the beginning of a renewed commitment to internationalism and the principles that bind us as a global community." Now, that's an inaugural joint statement. Following that, in July, we had an emergency conference of states, which was held in Bogota, Colombia. And arising from that emergency conference, which a statement was issued on the 16th of July. And basically, out of that, okay, there's certain principal commitments that states have bound themselves to as members of the Hague Group. And these are to prevent the provision or transfer of arms, munitions, military-related equipment to Israel, right? And it includes a reference to something called dual-use items. And I would like your listeners to remember this phrase, dual-use items, right? There's also a commitment to prevent the transit, docking, and servicing of vessels at any point where there's a clear risk of that vessel is going to be carrying arms, or again, what we're calling the dual-use items. Okay, it's to prevent the carriage of arms, munitions, military, and these are all military items, to Israel on vessels which are bearing the flag of Hague Group members. There's also to commence an urgent review of all public transport contracts to prevent public institutions and funds from supporting Israel's illegal occupation in the Palestinian territories and entrenching its unlawful presence. There's an obligation here, or there's a commitment to comply with obligations to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes under international law. And when we're talking about the most serious crimes under international law, we're talking about crimes such as ethnic cleansing and genocide. We're talking about the crime of apartheid. Okay, and then to comply with obligations or to support what's called universal jurisdiction mandates. And this is where you're looking at national legal frameworks and judiciaries, and that to use those universal jurisdiction mandates to ensure justice for victims of international crimes committed in the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, she actually said, her comment on this was, and there's 12 states that made a firm commitment to these, to put into effect these resolutions. South Africa is one of them. She said, these 12 states have taken a momentous step forward. The clock is now ticking for states from Europe to the Arab world and beyond to join them. So these are serious commitments that our country signed up onto, right? In terms of the Hague Group commitments, we are bound to fulfill them. Now, that phrase I used earlier, dual-use materials. Coal can be regarded as a dual-use material, because it has a direct contribution to Israel's war industry. It provides power to the illegal settlements on the West Bank. It entrenches the illegal occupation in the West Bank,
Absolutely. Yes, we've got a few minutes to go before we move on to our next guest, also from SAPM. So I just want to ask you the eternal question of what is to be done. How can civil society push back against South Africa's coal being exported to the apartheid Israel regime? And how can people get involved in this campaign?
Right. So 21st of August is a brilliant example of things. Okay. You might not have had demonstration actions where you had hundreds of thousands of people turning out. I mean, like Australia has seen, the last couple of weeks, we've seen 1 million people come out in protest in Australia. These protests did not reflect those sort of numbers, and they actually were not intended to. To turn out, there will obviously be further actions that take place in future, will be on a larger scale. But what these actions display is the alliance. You mentioned the large number of organizations that endorse this campaign. They stretch from almost every progressive element of South African society. And I'm just going to list this. There's Palestinian and environmental activists were involved in these actions, housing action organizations, the creatives were there, civic groups, ordinary individuals who just have some shared sense of humanity pitched up for these protest actions. We're looking at trade unionists that were there, the communists were there. This is a reflection of almost every strata of our society, from working class, bourgeois, into some of the more wealthy people of society pitched up here, based purely on their on their perspective on humanitarian grounds. And when we say how do ordinary South Africans participate in it, and I will say boycott items, right? If you've got business interests in or partnerships with organizations that collaborate or work with Israel, cut those ties, push for sanctions to be imposed against Israel. And in terms of the coal embargo campaign, I want to, and this is a very important issue that your listeners have to be aware of. There are thousands, millions of posts that go around on social media, all the social media platforms, advocating for Palestine, exposing injustice. And there's a lot of activity that happens on social media. But the thing is that, when things started in October 2023, there was an emphasis, or when the Israel's campaign, the aggressive campaign started or really took off into October 2023, there was an emphasis on the social media side because the message had to go out to the world that this is what was happening. These are the crimes being perpetrated. Right? And people pushed the social media narratives. At this point, approaching 2 years down the line, the time of social media to bring awareness to issues in Palestine is gone. We all know what's happening there now. So my message to your listeners is less time on social media, more time attending the protest actions, actually joining the solidarity groups to actually provide input, either whether it's on a strategic level, whether it's to provide resources, whether it's to provide moral support to the groups. But there needs to be more of a physical presence. And I'm talking across all lines, doesn't matter race, religion, language. South Africans in general need to push their full effort behind this campaign, just because we have a history of apartheid, and we must take an anti-apartheid stance, a firm anti-apartheid stance.
Thank you very much, Yeshelen Govender. We'll have to leave it there for now. We've got our next segment lined up. Yeshelen Govender from the South African Palestine Movement. Thank you very much for joining us today on Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media.
Thanks for the invite, and thank you for your listeners if they've actually listened to what I've said.
I'm sure they have. Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
In our next segment, we'll be talking to Nasiha Sumar and Zainab Tayyib, also from the South African Palestine Movement, about an upcoming exciting event in September, but also about some of the other activities of the SAPM and its allies in the Palestine liberation space. Don't go anywhere. Please continue to follow the live stream on salammedia.com or Salam Media's YouTube humanitarian journalism.